The town lay half dead beneath a furnace sun, its boards cracking in the heat, its silence broken only by the wheeze of an old dog asleep under a trough. Dust rolled lazy through the main street, the kind that stuck to your skin and tasted of iron. Inside the saloon, shadows lengthened against whiskey-stained walls, and the air reeked of tobacco and regret. Men bent over their cards, cursing under their breath when luck betrayed them, their voices rough as sandpaper. A piano sat mute in the corner, its keys yellowed, its silence heavier than music. The door creaked, hinges groaning as if warning the room. She stepped through, a figure that made the dice freeze mid-roll, and a card hang in the air before it was slapped down again. Not tall, not broad, but carved of the same steel the desert sharpened in silence. A scarlet scarf rode her neck, its fabric too fine for the dirt-blown town, and her revolver hung low at her hip, polished, ready, like a faithful dog that bit hard when called upon. Eyes followed her, wary first, then measuring. Some smirked, mistaking her stillness for softness. Others remembered whispers carried across counties, a woman who outdrew killers, who never missed when it mattered. She did not smile. Her eyes were cool river water, steady enough to drown in if you weren't careful. She crossed the bar, boots whispering against warped floorboards. The barkeep, a hollow-eyed man with a crooked jaw, poured without asking. She lifted the glass, let the whiskey burn, then set it down soft as a prayer. In the corner, a gambler watched her, the kind of man who made his living on sleight of hand and cheap luck. His vest sagged under sweat, and his fingers, pale and twitching, kept testing the edges of his deck. He knew danger when he saw it, and she was danger in velvet skin. Still, hunger makes men bold. Care play a hand? His words carried the tremor of a man betting more than coin. Her gaze fell on him like a weight. She did not answer right away. Instead, she turned her glass slow in her hand, the liquid catching lamplight like fire. Finally, she slid the glass away, stepped toward the table, and took the empty chair. Cards shuffled, chips clattered. The room drew closer, men leaning in, as if the very air was waiting for the turn of a card. She played with a patience that cut deeper than speed. Every motion measured, every glance enough to unsettle. The gambler laughed too loud when he won a small pot, drank too much when he lost the next. Her stack grew steady, not in leaps, but in inevitable climbs, like a tide against the shore. "You're lucky tonight," he muttered, sweat shining at his temples. "Luck's got nothing to do with it." Her voice was low, a gunmetal whisper that left no room for jest. Whisper spread. They said she one-shot a man's thumb clean off when he tried to deal from the bottom. They said she never aimed twice. Rumors crawled through the smoke, feeding the silence with unease. The gambler's hand shook as he laid his next bet. Too many eyes were on him, and men like him did not thrive under scrutiny. When his ace appeared too convenient, a murmur rippled through the crowd. The woman's eyes narrowed, not with surprise but with recognition. Her hand drifted toward a revolver, slow as a clock pendulum. The gambler stiffened, fingers darting beneath the table. Metal gleamed in the lamplight. The crack of a pistol split the room before most had even drawn breath. A bottle shattered on the bar, spraying whiskey across the floor. Smoke curled, thick and sharp, dancing upward in lazy swirls. The gambler sat frozen, his gun still under the table, finger tight on the trigger that never fired. A hole smoked inches above his head. The beam behind him splintered open like kindling. His eyes widened, sweat rolling down his cheek, not from heat, but from sudden knowledge of how close he had come to death. She let her pistol rest easy against her thigh, barrel still warm. "Try it again," she said quiet, so the room had to lean in to hear. "And I won't miss the next time." The crowd shifted, unease settling into something heavier, respect. The gambler swallowed, the weight of shame greater than fear. He let his gun clatter onto the floor. For a long moment, silence on the saloon. Then the murmur returned, cautious, reverent, like wind rustling through dry grass after a storm. She gathered her winnings without hurry, without triumph. Coins slid into her pocket, cards left abandoned on the wood. Her eyes moved over the room, pausing on faces, marking them, as if she was memorizing who had watched, who had laughed, who had stayed silent. Then she turned, boots striking a slow rhythm toward the door. The saloon breathed again, but softer now, careful. Outside, The street baked beneath the setting sun, the sky aflame in red and gold. She paused at the threshold, the desert stretching endless ahead. Behind her, the gambler sat shrunken, alive but undone, a reminder carved into wood and bone. She stepped into the dying light, and the door swung shut like the closing of a book whose ending had yet to be written. The gambler did not leave town that night. Shame had fastened him to the saloon chair, and when dawn bled through the warped shutters, he was still there, a husk of sweat and cheap whiskey. But shame has a way of attracting company, and by midday another shadow crossed the saloon's threshold, one heavier, darker, carrying the weight of unfinished stories. He wore a black hat pulled low, brim shadowing eyes that measured every inch of the room. A jagged scar carved from temple to jaw gave his smile a crooked cruelty, and his boots struck the floor with the slow certainty of a man who had never needed to run. The crowd hushed without being told. Men who hours earlier jeered at one another now shrank back against the walls. Even the gambler straightened, as if summoned by an executioner. The woman in the scarlet scarf was there again, seated at the same table as before. Her posture hadn't changed, upright, steady, her revolver angled like a loyal dog against her thigh. She did not flinch when the scarred man's gaze settled on her. Instead, she reached for her glass, drank, and let the silence hang like smoke. "You're the one," he said finally, his voice a rasp of gravel ground beneath wagon wheels. "The one who puts holes in ceilings instead of skulls." His smile widened, sharp as glass. "Merciful, they call it." She set the glass down, eyes never leaving his. Mercy's just another way of choosing who remembers they lived. A few men coughed, pretending it was dust. The gambler's hands twitched nervously against the table, itching for cards that might shield him. The scar man's shadow seemed to stretch across the floor until it reached her boots. "You've been winning," he said, tilting his head toward the coins stacked neat at her elbow. "Cards, respect, fear. But luck runs dry. Always does." He paused, letting the words coil around the room. "Question is, do you trust your luck against me?" It wasn't a question. It was a challenge wrapped in smoke. She leaned back in her chair, one boot hooking against the rung, and studied him with a calm that made the others shiver. The silence became unbearable until she broke it with a single nod. Cards were fetched, chips counted. The crowd pressed close again, every breath tight, every shuffle of the deck louder than thunder. She did not smile when she took her hand, nor did she frown. Her eyes were fixed on the scarred man, as if the cards themselves were only mirrors to reflect his soul. He played with confidence, fingers smooth despite the crookedness of his scar. His bets climbed higher, each coin slammed down like a coffin lid. She matched him every time, steady as a drumbeat, no tremor in her hands. The gambler hovered at the edge, eyes darting between them, as though his own life was tied to the outcome. As the hands turned, the game became less about cards and more about weight. Every glance was a bullet, every silence a blade. She saw in his eyes, the calculation, the hunger not just to win but to unmake her. He wanted her gone, not from the table but from the world. The room felt smaller with each card revealed. Sweat dripped down faces, though the air was cool with evening. Her stack rose, coin by coin, while his narrowed to a handful of desperate chips. Yet his grin never faltered. "You play like a ghost," he said softly, leaning forward so only she could hear. "Cold, restless. I've killed ghosts before." Her hand brushed the scarlet scarf at her throat, fingers pressing briefly against the fabric as if remembering something far away. She spoke just as low. "I'm not the one haunting this table." The final hand came. He pushed everything forward, chips, coin, even the silver buckle at his belt. All of it laid down with a clang that silenced the room. She watched, then slid her stack across, the sound of metal on wood sharp as a drawn blade. Cards turned. His smirk cracked for the first time. Her hand stood taller, cleaner, undeniable. A murmur swept through the crowd, part awe, part terror. But before triumph could take hold, he slammed his palm against the table. The sound jolted like a gunshot. He rose, slow, his shadow engulfing her. His voice cut through the noise. "Cards don't settle debts. Bullets do." The room stilled. Fingers twitched to her holsters, breaths caught. Her revolver was already loose in her hand, though still resting against the wood. Her eyes never left his, and in their steel was something colder than victory, sharper than the desert wind. The gambler backed away, heart hammering so loud it seemed to echo. He knew the night would not end with cards alone. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, deliberate, carrying weight enough to nail the moment into memory. Then tomorrow we see who owes who. The scarred man smiled again, all teeth and promise. He tipped his hat, turned, and walked into the fading dusk, his boots leaving marks like graves in the dust. The saloon exhaled, men rushing to breathe after holding it too long. She gathered her winnings in silence, but her eyes stayed fixed on the door where he had vanished. The game was over. The real bet had just begun. The saloon emptied in fragments at night, men shuffling out with their heads low, their boots dragging like guilty consciences. By midnight only lantern light remained, trembling in the glass, and the smell of gunpowder clung stubborn as sweat. She sat at the bar, back straight, her revolver resting quiet on the counter beside an untouched drink. The barkeep busied himself with rags, pretending not to look at her, though his hands shook too much to dry a glass. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains, heavy as a drumbeat announcing war. The desert storm came rarely, but tonight the sky had split open, lightning carving veins across the horizon. Each strike painted the saloon windows in stark silver, her silhouette etched against the glass like a ghost watching itself. The gambler lingered near the corner, his face hollow with fear. He had seen men shot for less than what she had done to the scarred outlaw's pride, and he knew the kind of vengeance that followed. His lips worked around words he couldn't seem to spit out. Finally he said, "He won't wait for dawn. Men like him don't forgive. He'll come with others." She didn't turn. Her voice was steady, low. "Then let him. Some debts can't be dodged." The gambler shifted, ashamed of his own trembling. He wanted to leave, to vanish down the road before the storm broke, but some stubborn cord tethered him there, as though her calm anchored even his cowardice. "Why risk it?" he asked. "You've already proved your hand. No one in this town doubts you now." She reached for the drink, lifted it, but only set it back down untouched, her eyes fixed on the warped boards of the bar, as if reading words burned there long before. Respect don't pay for what's owed. He won't stop until one of us is cold in the dirt. Best it ends tomorrow, where everyone can see. The gambler fell silent, swallowing the truth in her tone. The storm raged louder, rain striking the roof in furious rhythm. For a moment the world outside sounded like 1,000 boots marching. A soft voice broke the heaviness. A young drifter, barely more than a boy, stepped out from the shadows where he'd been nursing a watered beer all evening. His eyes were wide, lit by some reckless admiration. "I seen the way you handle yourself. Never seen anyone face him down and live. Folks will remember you. Maybe long after the rest of us are forgotten." She turned to him, her gaze weighing him. "Remembering's not the same as living. Don't look at me like I'm something to follow. This life costs more than it gives." But the boy only straightened his shoulders, trying to stand taller than his youth allowed. "Still," he said, "you give folks hope." Her eyes softened just for a breath, then hardened again as thunder cracked overhead. Hope was a dangerous currency, easily spent, rarely returned. She pulled her revolver closer, opening the cylinder, checking each bullet with ritual care. Brass gleamed in the lamplight, each round a promise. She slid them back in one by one, precise, methodical, then snapped it shut with a sound sharp enough to make the gambler flinch. "Tomorrow," she murmured, mostly to herself, "the storm won't be weather. It'll be bullets. And every man watching will know the truth of who owns this town." The barkeep finally found his voice, though it shook. "You don't have to stand alone. There are others here, men who'd fight if you asked." She met his gaze, calm as dusk. "I don't ask. Those who stand will stand. Those who hide, hide. That's how you find out who's worth the breath in their lungs." Lightning split the sky again, and for a heartbeat her face was cast in brilliance, the scarlet scarf like fresh blood at her throat, eyes unyielding, carved from something harder than stone. The gambler sank back into his chair. The boy clutched his cup as though it might steady his shaking hands, and the barkeep wiped at the bar though no spill remained. Each of them knew tomorrow would carve its mark deep, one way or another. As the storm rolled heavier, she finally lifted the glass and drank. letting the burn anchor her to the moment. She set it down with a slow exhale, then rose from her chair. Her boots struck the floor like verdicts, steady, final. She crossed the room and pushed open the swinging doors. Rain poured in sheets. The desert transformed into a mire of mud and lightning. She stood at the threshold, letting the water soak her scarf, her hair, her boots. For a moment she tilted her head back, eyes closed, as if baptizing herself in the storm. Then she stepped out into it, disappearing into the rain, leaving the saloon silent but for the drumming roof. The gambler whispered into the empty air, "Tomorrow we'll all be ghosts." And in the distance, as if answering him, a gunshot cracked through the storm. Not at the saloon. Not yet. Just a warning fired into the sky. His way of saying he was waiting. The storm swallowed the sound, but its promise lingered. Dawn broke like a wound, bleeding red across the desert horizon. The storm had spent itself in the night, leaving the earth raw, the air charred with the scent of wet dust and gunpowder still imagined. The town was awake early, its people drawn to the promise of violence the way moths are drawn to flame. They lined the porches, hushed, eyes fixed on the main street, where the mud had dried to cracked clay beneath the rising sun. She stepped from the saloon into that silence, boots striking the ground with slow certainty. The scarlet scarf clung damp against her neck, its color made brighter by the morning light. Her revolver rode low, oiled and ready, every motion of her stride carrying the weight of inevitability. She did not glance at the watching crowd. Their breath was not what she came to measure. At the far end of the street, the scarred outlaw appeared, black hat shadowing his face, his gang flanking him like wolves at his shoulders. His grin split the scar that carved his jaw, crooked and cruel, a grin meant to unsettle. But she did not falter. Two figures stood, the space between them wide and empty as the desert itself, yet heavy with the ghost it carried. The gambler stood among the crowd, pale and shaking, torn between awe and dread. The boy was there too, eyes lit with reckless belief, though his knuckles were white where he gripped the porch rail. The barkeep stood silent, lips moving in prayer he barely knew. They all waited, but none dared speak. The outlaw's voice carried down the street, low and jagged. "You should have left with your winnings. Now you'll leave with a coffin." She answered with silence. Her hand hovered just above her gun, fingers relaxed but ready, her gaze fixed steady on his chest. The air grew thinner. Dust shifted in lazy swirls at their boots. Somewhere a door creaked, then stilled. Time stretched long, every heartbeat a hammer against the ribs. Then the outlaw's fingers twitched. The draw came fast, faster than most eyes could follow. His pistol leapt from its holster, muzzle flaring with fire. But her arm moved like instinct sharpened by years, the revolver rising smooth, her shot cracking in the same breath as his. The street exploded with sound, with splintered, glass shattered, men shouted, but through the chaos came clarity. Her bullet struck true, spinning him back, the grin wiped from his face as blood darkened his shirt. His own shot went wide, tearing into the post behind her. The gang erupted, guns blazing, dust leaping in violent clouds. But she moved like water over stone, swift, unbroken, precise. Each shot she fired found its mark, every movement measured, efficient. The townsfolk ducked, scattering into doorways, but still they watched, drawn to the poetry of her violence. Bodies fell one after another until the street stank of iron and smoke. Thunder had passed in the night, but here it returned in the language of bullets. When silence fell, only two remained. She stood at the center of the street, chest rising slow, her revolver smoking in her hand. Across from her, the outlaw staggered, one hand pressed a hole in his chest, eyes wide with disbelief. He dropped to his knees, breath rattling like broken glass. "You," he gasped, scar twisting with every word. "You were never playing cards. You were playing death." Her eyes narrowed, calm and merciless. She stepped closer, revolver still aimed, her voice cutting the morning air like a blade. "No, you were, and you lost." His head sank, body folding into the dust. The grin never returned. The town exhaled as if waking from a long-held breath. Men who had shrunk in fear now straightened, whispers passing from lip to lip. Children peeked from doorways, eyes wide with something between terror and reverence. The boy stepped into the street, mouth open as if to speak, but the words never came. She holstered her revolver with slow finality, the sound of metal sliding against leather sealing the moment like a verdict. The scarlet scarf clung to her throat, damp with sweat and rain, a flag of survival. Her eyes swept the crowd, not seeking thanks, not asking for praise. She saw their faces, marked them as she always did, and then turned away. The gambler called out, voice cracking, desperate to anchor her. "Where will you go now?" She paused, boots sinking into the dust, but did not look back. Her answer was carried on the dry wind. Will the cards fall next? Then she walked toward the horizon, the sunrise painting her figure in firelight, each step carrying her farther from the town, deeper into the legend that was already forming in hushed voices behind her. The boy whispered to himself, as though speaking a prayer, "She knows how to handle a gun." The town believed it. The desert carried it. And the West, restless and wide, would never forget it.